On Stories from Real Life with Melvin E. Edwards, our guest today is Doug O'Brien, an internationally recognized expert in Ericksonian hypnosis, NLP, and sleight of mouth patterns. From performing at Carnegie Hall to guiding entrepreneurs, athletes, and creatives to peak performance, Doug's journey is both fascinating and inspiring. Today, we'll dive into his methods, his philosophy, and even a few personal stories that shaped his path.
But I think it does us a disservice to think that the conscious mind is all we are, that ego, that little thing. I often describe this conscious mind to being like a little kid in the car seat in the back seat with a little steering wheel going, I'm driving the car, I'm driving the car. But they're just thinking they're driving the car. And the car is being driven by the other than conscious mind in the front seat and the actual driving one. So I think best if we say, okay, how do I create a better relationship with my unconscious, with my subconscious?
Pull up a chair. It's story time with today's guest, Doug O'Brien.
You are listening to Stories from Real Life, a podcast by engaging storytellers for engaged story listeners. Here's your host, author and journalist, Melvin E. Edwards.
Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Stories from Real Life. I'm your host, Melvin E. Edwards. Thank you for joining me for the podcast where personal stories can have a global impact. As you heard in the intro, our guest today is hypnotherapist Doug O'Brien. Doug, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm really honored to be asked to be on your podcast. This is great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So you began your journey in the arts, studying piano and composing at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, then composing at places like Carnegie Hall, CBGB, and Studio 54.
Well, I wasn't composing at Carnegie Hall, no.
Oh, you are performing. That's what I meant to say. Yeah. Yes. So, can you share how that artistic life led you to the world of NLP and hypnosis?
God, no, they're not related at all. But I can tell you a little bit about that background. Yeah, I was a music major in college, and I studied for a year at the Guildhall School of Drama in London, but most of my education was at the State University of New York at Fredonia. Hail Fredonia, up near Buffalo. Buffalo Bills, go Bills. I used to work out there at the Fredonia campus. But I was a music major, and then I moved to New York City to play in rock and roll bands. And after Carnegie Hall, I played a recital at Carnegie Hall in 1980. I was playing CBGBs by December of 1980 in a punk rock band called Ultraviolence. So I was pretty eclectic in my taste, let's just say. And it was fun. It was very diverting, but a tough slog. Music is not an easy life unless, of course, you're one of those, rare few who really make it in the biz. But for most of us, it's a grind, it's just busy, hard. So around 1985, a friend of mine dragged me to this Tony Robbins event where I learned about firewalking and didn't want to go, but very persuasive person. And his mode of marketing back then was kind of like EST and the forum, which is to say, if you went to it and liked it, then you would be encouraged to bring your friends and family to the fold. So that's exactly what happened to me. To my shock and surprise, delight, really, it was cool, though. I liked what Tony had to say, and I liked this NLP thing he was talking about, neuro-linguistic programming. It was pretty amazing to walk across a bed of hot burning coals without burning my feet and living to talk about it. It was pretty cool. So I got involved and I got interested in it. And as time went on, it became more and more of my life, and music was less and less of my life. It just sort of segued over. So they're not at all related. Although what was interesting about learning NLP, which somewhat might be pertinent for today, is that much of neuro-linguistic programming is about saying that our brains are like computers. So that, the neuro-linguistics is the computer language of this neurological computer. So if you understand the neurological computer language, then you can program the computer. So you can get what you want from it rather than what it's sort of been factory preset, if you will. So what was interesting was that after I learned some NLP stuff, I started thinking about music. And if I had a an influence like Chick Corea playing a particular piece, instead of seeing Chick Corea playing that and go like, oh God, I could never do that. With the NLP thing, I thought, well, isn't that interesting? How does he do that? And I started to say, wow, I could do that too. I have the same neurology that he has. If I use my brain the way he uses his brain, if I use my physiology the way he uses his physiology, I can do that too. So it was much more of an encouraging thing. So it did have an influence, a little cross-pollination, if you will. But as time went on, I learned more and more about NLP and its precursor. NLP borrowed a lot from Ericksonian hypnosis. So the more I studied NLP, the more it took me to the world of hypnosis. And Ericksonian hypnosis is particularly famous for its sort of narrative approach, its storytelling approach. So Milton Erickson told stories in order to hypnotize people and help them change.
Okay, so that leads me right into my next question. So you're internationally recognized for your work in neo-Ericksonian hypnosis and havening. So could you describe what distinguishes neo-Ericksonian from traditional Ericksonian hypnotherapy?
Yeah, I can do that. It's a term that I first probably heard in a book called Hypnotherapy Scripts by Ronald Havens and Catherine Walters, I think I remember correctly, who were Ericksonians. But they also were saying, well, Erickson never used scripts. Erickson never wrote things out and said, this is how you do it. Erickson told stories and people figured it out for themselves. So their books where they showed some hypnotherapy scripts and wrote some and showed you how to write your own hypnotherapy scripts, they called neo-Ericksonian because it was new and different. And when I started studying what I thought was Ericksonian hypnosis, I was taking courses from this man named Dave Dobson, Dr. Dave Dobson, who always said, I'm not an Ericksonian. I developed my stuff separately from Erickson. I met the man once, but I don't do Ericksonian. But it was really very much the same thing, very, 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 very similar. So, but often when I've taught classes in Ericksonian hypnosis, people who have taken Ericksonian hypnosis go like, where'd you get that from? That's not Ericksonian. So I said, okay, screw it. It's not Ericksonian. it's neo-Ericksonian. Plus, I've learned NLP. NLP came from Ericksonian. That's new and different. Erickson's been dead since 1980. So it's new. It's neo.
You were still in punk rock bands back then.
I was. That's true. I had never even heard of him back then.
All right. So Robert Dilts' Sleight of Mouth patterns are central to your seminars. What makes these patterns uniquely effective in an NLP domain?
Wow. You're asking some really good questions, Melvin. When I was learning NLP, there were people who were so good at it, they could, number one, even do Ericksonian hypnosis. And number two, they do this Sleight of Mouth stuff. And I said, well, what's that? And it turns out it's a sort of an advanced NLP thing. You had to take a master practitioner training in order to learn it back then. Robert Dilts was the man who developed it. He was one of the co-developers, one of the co-creators of NLP in those days, and still is, actually. And so he developed this thing called Sleight of Mouth, which is conversational belief change. So instead of having to do some hypnotic process where you say, okay, now close your eyes and imagine this and floating down a stream and doing these processes, he could just have a conversation with you. And in the conversation, sort of listen for, what is the structure of your belief, and then use some, Sleight of Mouth patterns of interaction with you in order to guide you to a different belief, to reframe that belief and show you different possibilities. And in a sense, change the belief conversationally. So it's been really useful. A quick little story about that. I went and studied with Robert Dilts and did my master practitioner training with him in Santa Cruz, California, which is kind of the home place, the birthplace of NLP. And so it's really exciting for me to be there and learning it there. And I liked Sleight of Mouth. I was a trainer for Tony Robbins at the time. And when I came back to New York City, after having learned this, people, all the different trainers that I was working with and stuff said, what's that Sleight of Mouth stuff? Teach us, please. So I taught my first seminar back in like 1987 without intending to, just they said, please teach us. So I basically taught them what I'd learned from Robert. And it involves this map, this icon representational chart. So all the different patterns are placed very in an orderly fashion on this map. It's kind of like if you've ever seen a good, organized tool shed, and the guy's got the pegboard.
Doesn't look like my garage, I can tell you that.
Right, exactly. They've got the images on the pegboard, and you hang the screwdriver where the screwdriver goes, you hang the saw where the saw goes. It's all got that's kind of what it's like. It's got these illustrated things, and you put the patterns where they go. So anyway, I learned it that way from Robert. I thought it was so valuable. And finally, around 1990, when Robert came out with his book called Sleight of Mouth, he didn't have any of that in there. He'd left it out. And I thought, well, Robert, what are you doing? That's the most important part. I mean, how can you learn it without it? So I wrote my first book. I'm looking for it here. It's called The User's Guide to Sleight of Mouth, where basically I did what I did for the trainers of NLP, for Tony Robbins. I taught what Robert had taught me. I showed them the icon map. I showed them how to organize it visually and, with these kinesthetic anchors. And my first book is called The User's Guide to Sleight of Mouth. Thanks to Robert.
Nice.
Yeah.
So could you walk us through one of the more powerful sleight of mouth patterns and perhaps show how you apply it to both the personal and professional context?
Oh, my God, Edward. I didn't know it was going to be working so hard here. I thought I was just telling stories today. Yes, I can, Edward. Edwards, Melvin E. Edwards. Well, since you asked, there are two ways of doing sleight of mouth, I think, very intuitively, interestingly, effectively. One is called the agreement frame. Well, that's not true. It uses what's known as the agreement frame in order to align yourself with the person. And so you say, oh, wow, yeah, I can see that. I agree with that point. You're making a very good point there. I agree with you. And, right, so it's yes and, like improv comedy, right? It's like yes and. So you say yes and. Then you say, I know your intention is to do such and such. But what's interesting is you're actually getting something else. So what if you look at it from this perspective? And, so you do this kind of very gentle align with, but reframe, align with and reframe, yes and. So it's called the intent pattern, and you show them how you agree with their intention. It's a great intention, and yet what they're doing is not actually helping them get to their intention. It's getting them someplace else. So they shift gears in order to get their intention. So that's maybe one of the easiest ones to do. But one of the most effective ones to do, they're all effective. You have the right tool for the right job. It's like having that pegboard of tools. You use the screwdriver when you need a screwdriver. You need the saw when you use the saw. So the right tool for the right job. But generally speaking, kind of like the adjustable wrench of tools for mouth patterns is the analogy or the metaphor pattern where you tell a story that illustrates maybe the flaw in their thinking, but also the alternative way of thinking that would be more useful. So as an example, quick story. I have taught this class, my Sleight of Mouth class, for many different sorts of people, NLP trainers, coaches. That's my usual student, if you will. But I've also taught it to real estate people in New York City. And one of the challenges with real estate people is that they want to get paid for their work. It's weird. It's weird. So, sometimes people say, well, why should I pay you basically 2 months rent to find me an apartment? And in New York City, 2 months rent is a lot of money, right? Rents are expensive. So, 2 months rent is a lot of money to pay somebody to find them an apartment, especially if I can just go on Craigslist and find a good apartment. I know a guy who got a great apartment on Craigslist, no fee. So why am I paying you, 2 months rent? And so basically, one of the metaphors that people learn to offer at that point in time is a story that says, well, if you were going to get a root canal done because you've got an impacted tooth and you need to have a root canal done, would you just find the cheapest guy on Craigslist, or would you find the best dentist in town?
Probably don't want to find somebody on Craigslist for that.
The cheapest guy on Craigslist is probably not your best bet yet. So you pay for the expertise, So that's a very clean little metaphor that shows the principle involved. So that's a nice little sleight of mouth pattern right there.
Okay. So in your blog, you mentioned belief craft. to help clients change long-standing habits.
Really digging down here, Melvin.
Really digging down. So they help clients change long-standing habits like mindful eating. So how do you explain that role of belief systems in behavior change?
Right. Well, Belief Craft is the name of a seminar that I taught with a buddy of mine, a guy named Jonathan Altfeld, who wrote a book, I think, called Knowledge Engineering. So we were combining Sleight of Mouth with knowledge engineering. So that was a name we gave to our seminar. But it is, beliefs are everything. Beliefs are really what we build our lives on. If we believe that working out every day is going to be really healthy for us and make us look good and have energy, then we're more likely to work out every day. If we believe that working out could be dangerous, I've got that high blood pressure thing, and if I work out, I could die. So we're probably not going to work out every day. Right. So you want to find information and the beliefs that support your goals in life. It's just kind of like that. If I believe that alcohol is bad for me, then I drink a lot of water and not a lot of vodka. And you don't know which one this is. Vodka is so good for you. No, it's water. It's water. But we base our lives on our beliefs that we have. So if we can uncover what a person has as their belief system, we can help them to get what do they want to accomplish in life much more elegantly. It's half of my coaching practice is doing that actually with people.
All right, so let's talk about your books now. So what challenges have you faced in translating your spoken teaching style into the written form?
Well, that's a great question. You're asking great questions, and I'm pretending to complain, but I'm really appreciating your questions. These are great questions. I thought that I would make side income by selling transcripts of my tapes, because I record when I taught the Sleight of Mouth classes. They were well attended, but there were 15 people in there, 20 people in there. I thought there's a lot more people in the world that may make this a tape set, so I did. So certainly I did sell some tape sets, and I thought, well, now time moved on. Nobody bought tape sets, so I re-recorded it, made a CD set. Still, inexpensive, basically, and came with a workbook. And so I thought eventually to myself, why don't I write a book that is a transcript of the tapes that I'd made, the CDs that I made, and integrate it with that workbook that came with the course that I'm teaching on that CD set. So I transcribed the course and discovered that I don't talk good. When you try to make a book out of the spoken word thing, it just doesn't transcribe very well. So I had to actually write the book. It was good outline, basically. It was a good outline, but I had to actually write every word, writing it out and then editing it, et cetera. It took a long time to write the book. And then I sent it to a friend of mine because I thought, I'm done. This is good. I am done. And I said, I'm going to send it to my friend, David Gordon, and get him to write a nice little quote for the cover. And I say, this is a great book. You should buy it. But instead, David, being the wonderful person that he is, took a few weeks and sent me back the manuscript with all this red marks on it and stuff.
Like being in high school composition class.
Exactly. It shouldn't be in the front. Put this in the back. Just make this an appendix. Just get rid of that entirely. It's just almost like back to square one again. But thank God he did. It made it into a vastly better book. So it's challenging to just translate the spoken word into a book form. And so my book, The User's Guide to Storytelling, took me like 10 years actually to get down to be finished. So believe me, nothing AI about this book. I sweated this really literally for 10 years for lots of different reasons. But yeah, I'm very, very proud of how it has finally turned out, because I like to make things simple, but not too simple. I go by I think it was Einstein who said things should be as simple as possible, but not too simple, so you want to get it across. And I think that fairly well defines my philosophy for teaching and for writing, as I try to make things as clear as possible and simple as possible, as few words as possible, but still get the message across so that people can get a complete picture.
Nice. So you called havening techniques the revolutionary psychosensory therapy.
Yes, I did.
Can you explain what havening is?
I can. Yes. Well, let me tell you a story.
Okay, there we go.
Havening, the word havening comes from the idea that when you're involved in a situation that may be traumatic, something bad that's happening, if there's no feeling that you can escape from it, if you can't get away, you could say there's no safe haven. So havening is the idea of it's bring you to a place of safety. It was created by Dr. Ronald Rudin and his brother Steve, twin brother Steve Rudin. After a hypnotist named Paul McKenna showed Dr. Ron Rudin about tapping. I don't know if you've heard of different tapping techniques, but Ronald Rudin was skeptical about its, efficacy, why it would work, but he had no doubt that it did work. He tried it out a few times and people's phobias went away. And so he said, well, something's going on here. Let's figure out what it is. And so I'm going to tell you a very short version of this long story. So it took him about 10 years to do the research to find that when you tap or perhaps stroke certain parts of your body, that your body creates delta waves. It sends the signal to the brain in a delta wave. And that delta wave in turn, because our bodies are electrical chemical in nature, so the electrical delta wave goes to the brain releases chemicals in the form of oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, and GABA, or gamma aminobutyric acid. So which that down regulates systems, calms you down a good deal. But it also does some other things as well that I could get into, but I'm going to give you a short version. So basically, a psychosensory means it's psycho. We're talking, we're having, intellectual discussions, we're using words, it's a psycho, but it's also sensory. So there's this stroking of the arms, and havening touch is this downward stroking of the arms from the shoulders down the elbows, or it's stroking the face with the hands. These all give you delta waves. And that delta wave is kind of applied neuroscience, because this awareness that this is what's happening in your neurology, literally in your brain, is a way that we can achieve emotional, psychological healing through this psychosensory approach. So that's what havening is all about.
It seems like something that infants just inherently understand.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And mothers and fathers inherently understand. Like when a child is afraid of lightning or runs to mother at midnight, and mother doesn't go, "Oh, well, that's very interesting that you feel the way. Johnny, have a seat. Let's talk about this. When did this start?" They don't do talk therapy, right? They say, "Oh, it's okay. Don't worry. It's all right. It's all right." Right? So they do the stroking, very natural, very human, right? That's one of the great things I love about it. It's one of Ron Rudin's really developments of it. Is he saw, tapping works because you're stimulating this part of the body. EMDR works because you're creating delta waves when you move the eyes back and forth with eye movement desensitization and repatterning, EMDR. That's why that works. This is better. It creates a lot more delta waves. You get a lot more bang for your buck, if you will. And it's an amazingly effective therapy.
Can you actually do it to yourself and have it work the same way?
Absolutely. And funny thing, thanks to COVID, we discovered this is true. Not exclusively, but for the most part, prior to COVID, people would come into my office. People would come into other, certified havening practitioner offices, and we would apply the touch to the client. So we would reach over and stroke their arms. We'd reach over and stroke their face. And it worked great. And then COVID happened and we couldn't do that. People were, miles from each other. So we did what some people had to do anyway. Some people had to do this anyway. Like, for instance, if persons were already certified some sort of therapist, like in New York State, at least, like the licensed social workers weren't allowed to touch their clients, right? So a havening practitioner would sit in the same room as the person and show them what to do, but they would apply the touch to themselves. So we discovered that same thing works just fine over Zoom. So if I tell you, to do this, I'm providing the psycho part. I'm talking you through these things, through the different processes, but you're applying the sensory part, the touch, for yourself, and it works just as well, or at least nearly as well.
That's really interesting. So you're also a peak performance coach, and you've worked with diverse clients from Broadway actors to rodeo riders.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate the rodeo riders. I'm in Texas and come from a family of cowboys and farmers.
Oh, really? Do you?
Yes.
Have you ever?
I had two uncles who were bull riders in rodeos.
Yeah, that's what these guys were, bull riders. And the is it NPR? No, NBA, National Bull Riding Association?
Yes, and that's a bull riding association. And you know what it is. I can't even say it.
The National Bull Riding Association.
Yes.
Yeah, these guys were bull riders. They would get on a fucking 2,000-pound mad as heck animal that just wants you to get off me. And if they could stay on for 8 seconds, they won. But they'd still have to get off. You know?
And that's where the clowns came in.
Right, exactly. Because even if you win, this bull doesn't know it's over yet. He's still trying to get you off, and you got to somehow dismount without killing yourself. Yeah, interesting.
So how do you adapt your methods to suit those kind of varied clients?
Very excellent question. Yeah, that's the thing about it. Ericksonian hypnosis, NLP, it's both of them really. They're about the client. It's all client centered. It's adapting what we do to them. Very different needs. To have your success be, whether you stayed on for 7.9 seconds or 8 seconds is amazing. Or if your hand, happened to, touch the animal, it would disqualify you, sort of keep your head in a certain space where you're trying to be alive. That's a very unique situation. So if I was to sort of look up through my book of hypnotherapy scripts and say, okay, where's the page for not dying while at work for 8 seconds? Where's the script for that? There is no script for that. There just isn't one. So you got to, be ready and find out, what is the belief that they have? What do they believe is the situation? And then how do you interact with that and maybe shift the belief, maybe even just a little bit, right? Maybe even just a little bit, because they only need to stay on for 8 seconds. So maybe they've been bucked off at 7.8 seconds. Just need 2 more tenths of a second, they'll be okay. So, it could be just a minor change or not, it depends on the individual. People are different. But yeah, it's a really fascinating thing. So being able to appreciate that subjective experience has a structure to it. The first book of NLP, the very first book, NLP Volume 1, is entitled NLP Volume 1, The Study of the Structure of Subjective Experience. So our subjective experience has a structure to it. We see things, we hear things, we talk to ourselves, we feel things, we smell things, we taste things, and there's a sequence to that structure that changes our experience. If we change the sequence, we have a different experience, whether it's positive or negative. It's all subjective. But we can figure that out. We can figure it out through the asking good questions and listening and watching for eye patterns and the way people are responding. We can notice those things, and then create a process that's going to work for that individual. So it's amazing work, really. And adding to that, now we do havening on top of that. Pretty amazing work that we're doing.
That leads right into my next question. How do NLP, hypnosis, and havening work together in your coaching practice?
Well, interestingly, I have this website called Essential Coaching Skills. A number of years ago, I was working as a coach. I'm still working as a coach, but I was working as a coach and listening to other people talk about coaching who had never taken any NLP courses, never learned any hypnosis courses, never knew what Sleight of Mouth was, certainly didn't know what havening was. Or maybe they knew one of the above, but none of the others. And yet they were certified coaches and doing very well as certified coaches. And I just thought to myself, how is that even possible? How can they be a good coach and not know NLP and not know these questions that you ask to discern the structure of their subjective experience? How can they be a good coach without knowing that? It seems to me that's an essential skill. So I named my website Essential Coaching Skills. And I teach those. I teach Sleight of Mouth. I teach hypnosis. I teach NLP as these essential coaching skills. Havening I do as a separate adjunct, if you will. It's not part of that curriculum, if you will, but many of my students, for obvious reasons, want to learn it. and do. So, they work brilliantly well together.
Great.
I don't know if that answered your question thoroughly enough, but
it did. It does. So could you share a memorable client transformation story? So sort of an instance where combining NLP, sleight of mouth, and hypnosis led to something unexpected.
Well, it's not terribly unexpected because we expect them to do well. We expect them. But yeah, the thing about the world of NLP is that it is looking to use kind of a structure. There's a lot of NLP patterns, like there's the 6-step reframe as an example, which has 6 steps to it. And you follow step 1, it's followed by step 2 and step 3. And if you're successful going through it, then you're done after 6 steps. You've made an important change. Ericksonian hypnosis is very different from that, right? So you tell stories and you never really know how a person's going to interpret the story, right? I could tell the same story to a room full of people and they'd all walk away with very different experiences of what I was talking about and what was important about that story. They'd have different meaning they'd take from it. And so when Erickson would use these stories and these suggestions for people, sometimes they would shift their way of being in a way that was perhaps a bit unexpected. But still moving in the direction of positive functioning, because everybody's an individual. One thing that Erickson always said is that everyone is as individual as their own thumbprint, right? So it's not for me to say you should do this or you should do that. Let the person experience it and express it for themselves. So what you do really is, in a way, you dehypnotize them. Dave Dobson always used to call it that. He said, I'm not a hypnotist, I'm a dehypnotist, because I'm interrupting those patterns that keep people stuck in certain ways of being. I'm a victim. It's like, interrupt that pattern, let them find something new. They say, oh, and it would be expressed in very different ways for different people. But it's not that stuck thing anymore. It's now going to be expressed in positive ways. Maybe I'm a musician, maybe I'm a dancer, maybe I'm a banker, maybe I've always wanted to be a banker and I just never thought I could.
When I think about hypnosis, you may remember this. If not, this actually happened. This was not in real life. This was a cartoon on the Flintstones. Because when I think about hypnosis, I think about this. The time Fred Flintstone hypnotized Barney, and Barney thought he was a dog. And then he ended up getting caught by the dog catcher, and they had to go to the dog pound to get him out. What is hypnosis actually? It's not I'm sure it's not a total mental transformation like that.
Wow, I don't remember that episode. I hope that's Googleable. I hope I can find it. That sounds good. That sounds good. Hypnosis. I think I read it or listened to one of your other podcasts about healing. That people's unconscious minds are us. We are our unconscious. Our subconscious, our unconscious, and our conscious mind are one unit that they interact with each other. And so we might have a conscious mind that says, I want to go that way, but it's your unconscious mind that gets you there. Moving this body, there's 600 different muscle groups that have to work in tandem in order to do what I'm doing very easily right now, which is to walk back and forth across this space. It's really hard. I worked at a hospital for a while. I did pre-surgical hypnosis for heart patients at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in New York. Every now and again, I'd be called into some other departments. So I was working with some guys in rehab who had had a stroke, right? So they'd lost the ability to walk. Something they had been doing their whole life, suddenly they couldn't do it. So they had to relearn how to do it consciously, right? So they had these parallel bars and, physical therapists helping them, and they try to move that leg, right? Yay! And that was it for the day, right? Let's do some more tomorrow. And over time, and not that much time, but a few weeks, they'd, learn to walk again without the parallel bars. And then pretty soon, they'd be walking again fairly normally. Kind of amazing. The brain is very plastic in that way and create new pathways in spite of some brain damage that might happen through the stroke. It's quite remarkable. But I think it does us a disservice to think that the conscious mind is all we are, that ego, that little thing. I often describe this conscious mind to being like a little kid in the car seat in the back seat with a little steering wheel going, I'm driving the car, I'm driving the car. But they're just thinking they're driving the car, right? And it's the car is being driven by the other than conscious mind in the front seat and the actual driving wheel. So I think best if we say, okay, how do I create a better relationship with my unconscious, with my subconscious? How do I create a better functional trance that I can live in on a daily basis to get to where I want to go and to not be that stuck definition of who I was, but, expand on that and become, who I was meant to be in this world. And that is, Milton Erickson once said, patients become patients because they're out of rapport with their own unconscious mind. So some of the ways that we do, self-hypnosis and stuff is just to create a better, deeper connection and rapport with the conscious and the other unconscious or subconscious. My teacher, Dave Dobson, used the term other than conscious. So I use them all interchangeably, but they're different things, really. But to have that better connection is really sometimes the goal.
Okay. So reflecting on your career, from musician to hypnotist to educator, what do you view as your most significant contributions to the field of NLP and Ericksonian hypnosis? Are they going to be calling it O'Brienism?
Yeah.
O'Brien.
Yeah. O'Brien. Yeah, that doesn't work quite as well.
No, it's not it doesn't flow off the tongue.
But yeah, no, I don't know if anybody will ever do that, but I think, again, I like I said, I've made it a career mission, if you will, to make things easy and accessible for people who might have trouble learning these fairly complex situations. I've seen people who say, hey, NLP is simple. I can teach you NLP in 5 days. You get certified. I'll certify you in 5 days. You're a certified practitioner. Go in peace. And that's just not true. As a piano player, it took years, to get competence. I don't want to call mastery because there's a long way to go for mastery. But to get to a place of competence, it took a long time of diligent practice, focused practice. And I think that's what it takes for any skill, no matter what it is. And I think there's a lot of sort of simplifications, or if you will, say this is go here first and then do this. There are ways of teaching it to make it easier for people to follow in those footsteps. Sleight of Mouth seems like a huge thing for people. So we just do one pattern at a time and just do it over several months and just do one pattern at a time and, find out what's the most essential elements and just to do that. And I think maybe this new thing that I'm really focusing on is the storytelling. Like I said, Erickson was famous for his sort of narrative hypnosis, if you will, telling stories in hypnosis. And so I started teaching a course a few years ago with a friend of mine in England named Nick Kemp, who we taught a course called Stories from the Outside In, and it was about therapeutic storytelling. It was about Ericksonian hypnosis. But just the story, for how do you structure the stories? How do you make these stories? As time went on, we did less and less therapeutic storytelling and just sort of basically storytelling. How do you create a good story? Stories are not just a, chronological listing of events that took place. That's not a story. A story is that, you start here, something happens and there's a change, and then you sort of a returning, so there's an arc to a story. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end to a story. And so I love your podcast because it's about stories. It's about stories, and some of your podcasts have been amazing. Listening to some of these things, and your story, good heavens, is a pretty amazing story. But everybody has a story. Everybody has a story. And how do you tell the story? How do you get that story across to other people? So it's not just a chronological listing of events, but it is that this is where I started, this is what happened, and this is what came from it, and how it changed as a result. How do you create a story that people want to hear from your life experiences? And it turns out, actually, in writing this book, this User's Guide to Storytelling, everyone has a story. Everyone has lots of stories. It's not just like, what's your story? It's like, what's one of your stories? I have dozens of stories. I have hundreds of stories, as do you, as does everybody, right? And really the question is, how do you structure it and tell it in such a way that people, get it and hear it and resonate with it? Stories will do that if you do it well.
Yeah, I always say everybody's got stories to tell, just not everybody knows how to tell their story.
Yeah, exactly.
So I saw somewhere where you described yourself as a quiet and polite man with a wicked sense of humor.
I said that?
Yes. It's online somewhere.
Want to check
my sources. So how does your personality blend your influence in the way you teach and connect with other people?
Well, I had a greeting card that I liked so much. I put it in a picture frame and had it over my desk for many years. It showed a clown, kind of a harlequin figure. And basically the caption said, "Life's too mysterious. Don't take it serious." My wife is literally a clown. She would hate me if I did this, but this is a foam nose.
But you're going to do it anyway, huh?
It's not an official clown nose. I have an official clown nose. She is literally a clown. She teaches clown in New York City at the Barrow Group, and so it is about finding the humor in life. I mean, life's hard, but it's also funny, and we can. Part of what she does in her clown teaching, and she teaches at the New School, is to help people find their own ridiculousness, to be comfortable with your own ridiculousness. And I think that's so important in just life, in my coaching and my therapies with people and my teaching with people, it doesn't have to be perfect. And it's improved my piano playing too. When I started play piano at the Guildhall, the Guildhall was a tough place. I mean, there are kids there who are half my age from, Japan or whatever, who were great, much better than I was. And they were like 8. I hated those kids. But it's like, and you have these competitions, these piano competitions and stuff that you worked your butt off for. I mean, hours a day, hours and hours for days and days and weeks and weeks and months. Maybe one person wins them if they're lucky. I mean, yes, of course, somebody wins them, but everybody benefits from the competition. Really, ultimately, you get much, much better at it. But I was still as good as I might have gotten to be technically. I was always terrified to perform. I was scared. I don't want to say bad words on your podcast, but I was scared. It scared the bejesus out of me. And so accepting my ridiculousness, accepting this, like, I'm not perfect, but this is me. Take it or leave it, Monsieur Flop. I go up and I play the piano for people and say, "Hey, hope you like this. This is what it sounds like. It's a pretty good song. Hope you like it. Here's how it goes." And I just play it, and turns out people do like it. It's fun. And somebody once said to me, it's pretty rare for all those people in the audience to be sitting back thinking like, "I hope he sucks. I hope he really, hope he falls on his face and is just." Not do that.
It's not a sporting event,
right?
Where half the people are against you.
Right. So yeah, it's been really good to be discovering that, and to add the humor and things. I think humor just lightens things up, and if you can do it with humor, then why not? Dave Dobson, I mean, all these guys that I studied with, even Milton Erickson, had great senses of humor. And Dave Dobson said, "Well, while you're interrupting this stuck pattern, if you can just add a little humor to it too, why not? Why not make it fun while you're at it?"
Might as well. All right, so we start to wind down the conversation. I just have a couple questions left for you. So if you could hypnotize any famous historical figure just for a fun conversation, who would it be and why?
Why would I need to hypnotize him first?
I don't know. Because you're a hypnotist. You could just have a sit-down conversation and dinner with him if you want.
Oh, man, there's so many people. Wow. What about languages? Because I don't speak ancient Arabic.
This is hypothetical, theoretical. You speak whatever language they speak, or vice versa.
Well, I would love to have a sit down with Milton Erickson, because he died before I even heard his name, at least that I was consciously aware of. So I would love to, sit down and maybe be hypnotized by him. I'd love to have a conversation with him. That would be amazing, because he was an exceptional human being, and everybody who did have a conversation like that with him remembered it. You know what I mean?
Would you want to sit down with Freud?
Nah.
Me either.
I mean, yeah. I'm sure it would be fascinating. My teacher, Dave Dobson, was very anti-Freud. He used to say, Freud was the greatest hypnotist of all time, because he hypnotized generations of people to believe that you had to do Freudian analysis to make change. And that's just a BS. So that's a belief system. That's what he said.
Freud the fraud. Well, maybe not quite that far, but we'll just leave him out.
Dr. Rudin loves him. He thinks he's a genius, and I think there's a case to be made for that. It was a situation back in those days where nobody understood the unconscious mind. He got that a lot from his studies of hypnosis. By the way, Freud did study hypnosis. Hypnosis was a big thing back in the 1890s and stuff. Freud learned it from a guy named Coué. A lot of his theories of the unconscious came from his work with hypnosis. But he kind of poo-pooed that whole thing. And it's because, number one, he wasn't very good at hypnosis, and Coué was great at it. And Freud had a little bit of ego about it, which is kind of funny because he made up that term. But nevertheless, a bit of a genius, really, in a way. But, times have changed a lot in the 100 and some odd years since he did his work.
All right. And as a final question, something I ask all of my guests, what one piece of advice would you like to leave for the listeners on any topic?
To discover and be comfortable with your own uniqueness.
So quirks are okay, is what you're saying.
Quirks are us. Quirks are us. Yes, indeed.
So you're a quirk factory, is that what you're saying? A superstore quirk.
Yeah. But just for a quick second, I don't want to make this isn't about a commercial or anything, but this book, the User's Guide to Storytelling, is about that. It's saying, what's your story? What's unique about you? Not what's the same about everybody else that everybody else can say that's you, but what's unique and different about you, and how to just own that and love that and accept that about yourself and know that is your strength. I think that's a lot of what this is all about.
It's sometimes surprising that other people might be interested in hearing your story that you think is just mundane or routine.
Yeah.
Some people may not have ever heard anything like that, and they may be motivated.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for saying that. And thank you for doing what you're doing. I'm really enjoying listening to your podcast and all the stories that people bring here on your amazing podcast for real life stuff. It's amazing.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Doug.
Yeah.
So please go to my website at podcastreallife.com for more information about my guest and the things that we discussed today, including links to his books. So that's it for today's episode of Stories from Real Life. Join us again next time for another chance to learn from each other. Until then, don't forget to shine your light wherever you go.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Stories from Real Life. Don't forget to subscribe and share. Let's meet right here every Tuesday and Friday. See you then.